everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be doing another book review. This time I'm reviewing The Blue Sisters or Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. And while I am totally happy with my purchase at the end of the day, I do like the US edition a lot better because I do feel like the oil painting is a lot more eye-catching than this one. This one just looks, printed on, although I'm pretty sure it's also another oil painting. I think that the US copy bears a lot of resemblance to Cleopatra and Frankenstein, which is another book by Coco Mellors, which I read last year. As I said, at the end of the day, I'm still excited, I'm still happy, and I can't wait to get to my review actually. And here's a fun fact about me. I am actually one in 4 sisters. And although we are not like proud owners of a house in New York or London even, or are any of us models that have been to Tokyo for a modeling gig, we're not fancy like the characters here. I could relate to the book to some level because I know all about the chaos and the complexity of growing up in a household filled with sisters. Now, I was super drawn into the book because it was a story about sisters. I was even more excited about this. I was more excited going into this than I was when I was reading Cleopatra and Frankenstein. As somebody who really loved Frozen and Charmed growing up, I really do enjoy reading about the complicated relationships of sisters. And I love that Coco Mellors does have a passage here about how everything interesting, something like that, comes in force. Like, there are 4 seasons, 4 directions in the compass, or 4 elements. Yeah, so everything interesting comes in force. And there happens to be 4 years after every Olympics, which is the same age gap that I have in my family. Although that's probably another story for another day, or I don't even want to get into that because it's a little bit personal. But you get the gist. The sisters, the fourth. I was instantly drawn to the book because I could probably relate to it. Now, let's talk about the synopsis of the book. When we meet the sisters, it's been actually a year since they lost Nikki, the middle child, who happens to be the most nurturing and also almost like the family's peacemaker. Now, how Nikki passes away is quite sad and admittedly very gut-wrenching, and I really do commend how Coco Mellors touches on her death and her passing, because it has a lot to do with women's pain. Now, I think I did touch on women's pain when I was doing a review for All's Well by Mona Awad. In that video, I did comment about how women's pain are often brushed off because we are viewed as the weaker creatures, so physically weaker, mentally weaker, emotional, all that stuff. And because of it, we are viewed as the gender that cannot withstand any type of pain. We're basically the weakling. So when we start to feel pain, whether mentally or physically, specifically when it has to do with our reproductive system, it's often shunned as something that we can easily get over. Ladies, I think you have heard it once or twice, or probably more times in your life, whenever you're in pain from your period, or you're suffering from something far more serious that has to do with your period or your reproductive system. People just say, oh, pop an Advil, get some exercise, drink some water, de-stress. But, sometimes that there are so many underlying issues. Now, I'm admittedly going in circles here, but you get the gist. We're complicated creatures. Our bodies are very complicated and often misunderstood at the end of the day. So I'm not gonna specifically touch on what happened to Nikki because that would be a spoiler, but I will say that it was very tastefully done, and it was sad, and again, it was very gut-wrenching. And I really did end up empathizing with what happened to the sisters. So again, the story does revolve around the 3 remaining sisters. We get to see and learn their life stories, like where they are right now, from their POVs. We have Avery as the eldest, and Bonnie as the remaining middle child, and Lucky as the youngest sister. So I'm gonna give a bit of a backstory about each sister. I mean, I already spoke about Nikki. Now let's talk about the eldest sister, Avery. Avery, she has her life together, like, or so we think. She's been in AA meetings for like the past 10 years, and on the surface she actually has like this near perfect life, or even if you're looking at her like without knowing what she went through, you would think, oh wow, this girl has her life together. She's in her 30s, she's living in like an upscale neighborhood in London with her wife Chitty, and she's like this big shot professional who managed to turn her life around after a very dark moment in her 20s. Now, probably the sister that I could relate to the most, although we obviously don't have the same attitude. I'm more of a hothead. I think Bonnie is better than me. So the middle child that's remaining next to Nikki is actually Bonnie. Bonnie, she sort of has this like failed career in boxing. She harbors like the most guilt after Nikki's passing because she was sadly the one who found her body. And then we have the youngest sister. Her name is Lucky Blue. This might be just pure speculation, but I do feel like that Coco Mellors got the inspiration for Lucky Blue, at least just the physical attributes and the job. Lucky Blue does bear the same name of this male model who was quite popular during the 2015 to 2019 Tumblr era. You know that time when we still had like the Ellen show? Like, I remember like this model named Lucky Blue actually appeared in the show, and he had blonde hair and blue eyes and had a very interesting look on his face. I have no idea where he is right now, but I if I recall correctly, he also happened to be like the youngest among his siblings that were also very good looking. So I'm not so sure if there's a connection there, but yeah. To be completely honest, I would love to see Hunter Schafer. I don't know if you know her, but she is a big shot actress right now. She used to be Jules in Euphoria. Should I say she used to be, because the show is still actually ongoing, but she is Jules in Euphoria, and she's very, very beautiful. She's blonde, like icy blonde, and has this the bluest eyes ever, and she also happens to be a model. So I'm hoping if this book does get like a series or movie adaptation, Hunter Schafer would seriously consider going for the role of Lucky Blue. But anyway, I know I just strayed so far from the topic, but Lucky is, again, the youngest sister, and she happens to be, unfortunately, the one struggling with addiction the most. Her scenes have a lot of self-destructive scenes in them, and there are a lot of triggering SA scenes as well with Lucky, and also illegal substance abuse. So do be aware of that when you read this book. So now that I'm done like introducing the sisters, my first comment is that I do feel like they are like cliche characters. Like the eldest one, she's the one trying to keep the family together, and the youngest one happens to be the misunderstood rebel, and the girls in the middle, they're the ones trying to find themselves the most. And I think that's just like one major pet peeve that I have of this book. Now, other things that I kind of noticed from the book was that the writing and the pacing and the overall structure of the story felt a little bit too bloated out. I know that that's like a common problem that I have encountered with books, but I like to think that my opinion is legit. Anyway, like I do feel like a lot of the scenes were repetitive. The chapters were drawn out. Like, say for example, we get a lot of scenes like where the sisters are arguing again and again and again, and we get it. They can't like get along, and they're trying to process their grief together. But then it ends up happening again and again and again, and then all of a sudden in the ending they get along. So it kind of doesn't become that believable anymore. Another type of scene that keeps getting repeated in this book is like the fact that they're all the self-destructive in their own ways, especially Lucky. Like, I again, like, it's the same problem with them all constantly arguing. Like, they're constantly arguing and they suddenly made up in the ending. And all the sisters, they're self-destructive, especially Lucky, Avery to some extent, and then all of a sudden they're okay by the ending. So those were like major pet peeves that I had reading the book. Speaking of spark, I think Coco Mellors will always have this interesting first chapter that will hook you in. Whether it's cringe, like in a good way, like Cleopatra and Frankenstein, or melancholic yet so thought provoking, like Blue Sisters, she will always hook you in the first few chapters, or specifically like in the first chapter. Like, overall, I felt like this pattern totally made this otherwise good book lose its spark. But then again, like, I humbly feel like Coco Mellors can work on like her patterns or her repetitive patterns. Like, I would love to have a book that is like a roller coaster ride, not like something that keeps going down and down and down and suddenly it shoots you right up. But like, that's how I feel like when I'm reading her books. I felt like all those like repetitive chapters could have been a better opportunity for her to tell us like about the sisters when they were together or when they were growing up. We do have some of those like glimpses into those in certain chapters, or of their like family dynamics in general, but I think, like, in my opinion, by the end of the book, we don't really know anything about the Blue family at all. We know about their individual lives right now, but we don't know much about how they were growing up. One thing I want to kind of highlight is their parents. Like, I understand that the mom and dad were absentee parents, especially the mom, but she just like drifted in and out of the book, and there was no proper build up or explanation about their relationship, and she's just suddenly all of a sudden like appeared in the book. Whenever there were mentions of her, it felt like I was reading a totally different story. Of course, when it came to the ending, I feel like I was ultimately happy with how the book ended. I was happy for the sisters, especially for Avery. This is like a mild spoiler, guys, so stop this video if you don't want to know. But I do feel like it was a good thing that she ended her relationship with her wife. I felt like they were two different people in two different stages of their life, and I don't think that wanting to be together alone could have resulted like in a happy marriage. And I love the how Coco Mellors tackled that. Like, it was so tastefully done, and it was so relatable, and it felt so real, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate to that. For Bonnie and Lucky, I kind of predicted their endings. I mean, it wasn't bad, it wasn't boring, it was just like so for me. I was actually super happy for them, but I was actually more happy, unfortunately, because that kind of meant that this book was also coming to an end. So anyway, like, to conclude, like, my experience with the book, I think that this was a good book. It just wasn't memorable. One good thing though is that, or like another good thing, I know that she's an excellent writer at the end of the day, and I really want to applaud Coco Mellors for that. But then I think another good thing about this book is that I didn't feel the need to hurl this book to a wall because the characters were infuriating, which goes to show that you can write about deeply flawed characters without having them infuriate your readers. I guess I floated between giving this book a 3 or 3.5. I don't know what difference in the 0.5 is, but I feel like the 0.5 is kind of generous. So I decided to go with a 3/5, which is the same score that I actually gave Cleopatra and Frankenstein. Now, I don't watch like Just Like That, which is like the spin-off for Sex and the City, but then I did hear that Carrie Bradshaw actually listed this book as one of like a must-read. I feel like this is a book that Carrie Bradshaw can totally jive with, because it is a book about privileged people, privileged women, and going through like self-destructive problems, and to some extent, like, it's them creating their own problems, you know? To be completely honest, I'm not so sure if I want to read another Coco Mellors book, because I do have a feeling like it's going to fall into the same pattern, like a privileged woman who's deeply flawed and goes through some problems and goes to be self-destructive and does something like cheating or abuses like illegal substances. Like, those experiences or those stories deserve to be heard, and writers are obviously free to write about them. But if you're writing the same thing over and over again, where's the diversity there? Like, at the end of the day, if I'm gonna pick up another Coco Mellors book, is it gonna be the same pattern again? I'm gonna expect the same things again? Because like Cleopatra and Frankenstein, like, these are about privileged people living in New York City battling against their own demons. And again, like the Blue Sisters, they all have their demons. They're all living in popular, rich neighborhoods. I just feel like the two books were just very similar, even though like their situations were different, but then the overall theme and the overall structure of the book ended up being very similar to each other. But I'm hoping again she will prove us wrong, and I'm kind of on the fence. Like, will I read another book by Coco Mellors? Will I not? That calls to be seen. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this video. Have you read this book? And if you have, do you think that it lives up to this hype? Like, I know a lot of people were excited about this book as they were excited about Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I overall think that the books are quite similar. That's why I gave a similar score to each. But maybe you have another opinion. Please share that with me. In the meantime, I'll see you on my next video. And speaking of that next video, I am actually currently reading You Like It Darker by the man himself, Stephen King. I got this for my birthday. It's so cute. And I actually read like 3 of the short stories here, and so far they've been getting like 5/5, 4/5 scores. So I'm hoping that that momentum continues to build up, and I can't wait to share the review with you. Oh my god, I'm about to burp. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video again. Bye.